High School in the Media Center on Wednesday, May 14th, 2003. Today we are interviewing Colonel Bill Beekman. He was born on August 19th, 1946, and he currently lives in Beaver Creek, Ohio. He served in the Air Force, and his highest rank was the colonel, and he served in the Vietnam War.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Anyway, I'll go through a brief review of my Air Force career, and then, as I understand it, you'd like me to concentrate a little bit on my prisoner of war experience in North Vietnam, and I'd be glad to after that answer any questions about the Air Force, about assignments, about flying experiences, or about the POW experience. I started out graduating from high school in Toledo, Ohio, and at that point my main goal was to really become an astronaut, which is something I had wanted to do since I was 7 or 8 years old, back when Sputnik was first launched into space by the Russians, which was the first satellite to go into space. So I kind of set my goals as far as academics and such in high school to attain my goal that I wanted to reach. After graduating from high school, I had gone through my local congressman and had applied for admittance to service academies. I'd also looked at many scholarships because I basically wanted to go to a university that had one of the best programs in astronautical engineering. Now, aeronautical engineering is study of flight within the atmosphere. Astronautical engineering is exo-atmospheric study of spacecraft, space vehicle design, guidance and control, orbital mechanics, and things of that sort. Anyway, so I had looked at a number of other schools: University of Michigan, University of Virginia, Ohio State, Purdue, MIT, and had been accepted at all those and had scholarships. But I had also the opportunity to either have my choice of the Air Force Academy or West Point or Annapolis. And the Air Force Academy had the best program and also was best direct route to be able to attain my eventual goal. I went to the Air Force Academy mainly for the academics, found out that it was extremely military environment as well, so that hit me like a brick in the face. It was a very tough program, especially the initial summer and the initial year in which you're pretty much at the bottom of the rung and you're going through military training as well as academics and a quite vigorous athletic physical program. So with all that, you have about 1 or 2 minutes to yourself every day, and your day's about a 20-hour day usually. Sometimes you're lucky on Sundays and get to sleep in, but that's about it. So it was a difficult program, but I managed to squeak through and graduate and go on to pilot training. And pilot training was quite a vigorous program. There's an initial T-37, which is a small two-engine jet, two-place. The eyepiece sits next to you and hits you upside the helmet every time you do something wrong. And at least some eyepiece did. Fortunately, I had an IPU who was a little calmer. And then you go into the high-performance aircraft of the T-38. Now today they have a track program that after T-37s, you either go into T-38s, which lead on to fighter aircraft or high-performance fighters, bombers, and the T-1 program, which is a fairly brand new aircraft out, which is a two-place airplane, and it prepares you for cargo and other heavy airlift aircraft. And anyway, after the one-year program of graduating, I was near the top of my class, and so I pretty much had my choice of aircraft, and we got a good group of fighters down, so a bunch of us went off to F-4 training to fly the F-4 Phantom. And after training in that for 6 months, then I went off to operational assignment. Even though Vietnam was going on at that time, I was not assigned immediately over to Vietnam. I was assigned to Davis Monthan in Tucson, Arizona, and then I went on to MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida. A couple of pretty good assignments. So far I've been in Phoenix, Arizona, and Los Angeles, north of Los Angeles for the F-4 training, and then Tucson, and then off to Tampa. So I was at least enjoying the areas that of the country that I was being stationed. And after MacDill, then I was assigned to Vietnam, and I was assigned to Da Nang Air Force Base, which is in South Vietnam. Many of the bases were in Thailand and flew out of Thailand, but there were also a few in Vietnam, and that's where we felt we fought the real war, because we had to fight it 24 hours a day. We came back from our missions, and there were still rocket attacks and mortar attacks on our air base during the evenings, and so it was 24-hour-a-day job where as those guys in Thailand, they got back from their missions and they could relax and go to the officers club and have a good time. We were lucky if we could get a hamburger at the officers club, because we were at the end of the supply line. Anyway, I'll stop complaining about my conditions over there, but right towards the end, Da Nang was being closed, and we were moved to Tak Ly, Thailand, which was Tak Ly Air Base had been closed in approximately 1969, and it was reopened, and our wing was moved over there, and I enjoyed a whole week of Thailand before being shot down, and then wound up, after 3 days of escape and evasion, wound up being captured, and I was interned in the Hanoi Hilton, or Hoa Lo prison in downtown Hanoi, the capital of North Vietnam, for about a year. And then we were repatriated after the ceasefire had been signed. And after that, I went to senior staff school, which is a leadership type of school, and then back to a flying an assignment where I flew C-9s, which are air medical evacuation aircraft. It's basically a DC-9, or as you guys would know, an MD-80 these days, if you've flown commercial very much. And we basically flew patients around the country to different medical centers for where the specialties were that they needed, or the operations that they may have needed. And many times went out, picked up burn patients and things like that, and took them to burn centers. Anyway, I had that assignment for about 4 years, and that was outside St. Louis, Missouri, so that was a pretty good assignment also. The only one was at leadership school. That was in Montgomery, Alabama, and I don't know if I care too much for Montgomery. You know, almost all the restaurants in that town had all the catfish you could eat, but that was about the main fare for that area. Anyway, after St. Louis and Scott, then I went back to school at the Air Force Institute of Technology, which was right here at Wright-Patterson, and received a master's degree in astronautical engineering, lo and behold. Before that, I had gotten a master's while I was in St. Louis at night school, and it was a MBA, basically, a master's in business and management, or business administration. And it still did not prevent me from getting a technical master's, though. Then after that, I had a directed duty assignment, and that was to the Air Force Weapons Laboratory. And at the Air Force Weapons Lab, I worked in the high energy laser weapons. And we basically created a space defense program, which we briefed and sold to the chief scientist, chief White House scientist, who briefed President Reagan at that time, and pretty much excited him about the program, because it was basically a program that was not only a deterrent to try to knock out a good portion of any nuclear weapons that would be launched by Russia at that time against us, but to certainly take out any accidental launches of say a single or a small squadron of missiles that would be launched, that we could easily take out in the launch phase before they ever achieved suborbital range, at which time the MIRVs, which are individual nukes, split up, and then it's much harder to try to intercept and destroy. Anyway, we were basically developing the technology to build these laser weapons that would take out a ballistic missile on launch, whether it came from a submarine or whether it came from land, such as the USSR. After that assignment, I went back to flying, and I was stationed here at Wright-Patterson. Once again, by the way, that weapons lab is out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then back to Wright-Patterson, where I was ops officer and squadron commander of a T-39 squadron, which was basically a commuter jet that the Air Force uses to shuttle around different inspection teams, burn teams, which are physician, nurse teams that meet the aerovac aircraft to take care of severely burned patients. And also general officers. And we flew a lot of the generals around, and they'd actually fly the aircraft. We would train them, and the ones who were rated pilots would fly, and we'd, as instructors, we'd sit there and make sure, kept them out of trouble, and kept them from running into the ground and get to their destination. But anyway, we transferred, during that time we took the T-39s to the boneyard, which is out in Tucson, Arizona, where aircraft are mothballed and decommissioned, and we transferred to C-21 Learjets and C-12 King Air turboprops. And I was fortunate enough that I had moved up to squadron commander at that time, so the squadron commander and ops officer each had to be checked out in one aircraft or the other. We actually checked out in both aircraft, but as far as our main flying airframe, so being the senior ranking officer, I took the Learjet, and my ops officer got to fly the turboprop. And then after that, my last assignment was in the Pentagon for approximately 4 years, and I was working at Headquarters Air Force in research and development. Then I moved over as Secretary of the Air Force's office in the same area, research and development, and I retired out of the Pentagon in let's see, it'd be 1988, so about 15 years ago. And then I worked for a defense contractor for 5 or 6 years, and then I started my own company with a friend, and it was a medical corporation, which we had for about 10 years, and we sold that about a year and a half ago. And I'm basically semi-retired. I spent a lot of time devoting my energies towards a mentoring program called Kinship of Dayton, and also work as a Red Cross volunteer at Wright Cat Medical Center a couple of days a week. Anyway, that's basically my career, and to explain the POW situation, I was on my 175th mission, combat mission, over in Vietnam, and we flew out of Da Nang. We flew missions in South Vietnam, supporting the South Vietnamese troops against Viet Cong or North Vietnamese regulars. We flew in Laos, which was where the Ho Chi Minh Trail was, and there were a lot of trails, and a lot of the supplies were brought down from North Vietnam to support the war in the South, because North Vietnam was trying to reunite their country, and they were forcibly trying to take over South Vietnam. And then also we started flying north missions. Again, there had been a break from 1968 till late 1971, in which there were no flights up into North Vietnam. We had ceased flying up there, but we started up again under President Nixon. He had promised to end the war, and basically we had opened up a lot of the restrictions and a lot of the targets, so that we're pretty much we were going full force as far as trying to end this war, and the military leaders were basically given charge of the tactics and strategies to use in the war to finish it and win it, and basically get us out of it. anyway, flying up north after about my 45th mission in North Vietnam, we were escorting a group of F-4 bombers. They were configured for bombs. There were 12 of them. There were 4 of us. We were configured in our flight of 4 for air-to-air fighting to protect those bombers. And during that protection, we wound up getting shot down by MiG-21. It was a heat-seeking missile fired by that 21. It was fired at our wingman, but we went into a hard left turn as soon as we spotted him, and our wingman passed under and to the inside of the turn to keep up with us because we were at full military power. So unless he went to afterburner, he wouldn't be able to stay with us unless he got to the inside of the turn. And the missile, I saw the flight of the missile the last couple of seconds, and it broke off of number 4 and hit us. And so we lost hydraulics and electrics, and had a fire going in the cockpit, and pretty much the engines were both winding down to 0, so it pretty much told you that the aircraft wasn't going to fly anymore. I had attempted to restart the engines, but I had fired lights on both engines, so I wound up telling the backseater to eject, and then I ejected at about 26,000 feet. And they shot at us in the chute on the way down, but we came down in a wooded, hilly area, and our survival training taught us to ditch the chutes and the helmets and get into hiding within, move about, as far as you can, and get into hiding within about a half an hour. And sure enough, that worked, because after that there were about 500 villagers and local militia up in the hills searching for us. And anyway, I traveled at night, and I continued to move about 10 miles each night to the north towards China, towards the Chinese, North Vietnamese border, because there were safe areas up there where there were very little population and it was fairly easy to get rescued. They tried to rescue on the second day, and both the helicopters took hits trying to cross the Red River, where I had told them not to cross, but they decided to make a straight shot for me, and they both took 37mm anti-aircraft rounds, and they had to return to base. So I had to wait until the next day for an attempted rescue, but it was fogged in Thailand, which I didn't know, and I wound up getting caught in deep elephant grass, which was not a good hiding area, and surrounded by local villagers that were searching, and they pretty much caught up with me. The first person to find me, I had my gun cocked and ready, and the first person to find me was quite a surprise, because it was about a 15-year-old girl, and she was a little surprised to look down the barrel of a gun, and she went running away screaming, and I was fired upon about 3 or 4 or 5 rounds that fired at me into the grass. So I broke the area off my radio so it could be used by them, and I emptied the gun, and tried to hide that, and stood up because there, were at least 100 of them. And I found out later that only 2 of them were armed. One had a bolt-action rifle, and the other had a pistol, and that was it. So I was probably better armed than they were. But that's, Monday morning quarterbacking. And they took me on down to their village, and from there it took about 6 days to get into the normal prison system and back to Hanoi. And during that time there was quite a bit of torture, and there were a lot of rallies that were held with the different villages along the way, and they would do things like hold guns to your head and fire them. Fortunately, no bullets in the chambers, but still they'd do a lot of harassment like that, and tie you up pretty tight, where cut off all your circulation for long periods of time, and push you around and let the villagers beat on you a little bit. But by the time we got into the regular prison system, the world pressure from around the world on the North Vietnamese had caused them to stop the severe torture that they had been doing to the prisoners of war, the American prisoners of war. And they basically just used that. Well, they did something to me. The first night they tried to elicit some military information, like tanker tracks and frequencies that we used, attack frequencies and stuff like that. And I wouldn't tell them anything but name, rank, and service number, and they took me outside and tied my hands behind my back and threw the rope over a beam and pulled it up and dislocated both my shoulders. And the interrogator said, well, the least you could tell me is where your hometown is, and we could talk about that. And they just try to get you talking, basically. When I got put into the Heartbreak Hotel area, where isolation cells were, they're very small, 4x6 cells with a concrete bed, and there was one window, barred window, up high. You had to stand up on the bed to get out there, and that's how I got my shoulders back into sockets, by simply working to get hand up on those bars, and then just basically hang down from the bar with the weight of my body, and force my shoulder back into place, because I'd had dislocations before in high school football and stuff, and I knew the longer it stayed dislocated, the more damage could be done, the slower it would get. So that night I had to get them back into the sockets, and it was painful, but it was worth it, getting it back, getting back to being able to function somewhat. And then basically there was a lot of isolation. If you got caught communicating, as we got into, after a while we got into bigger rooms with more POWs in the room, and we would communicate with the other cells around there. We would get our orders from the senior POWs who were isolated from the rest of the camp, but we passed notes around using South Vietnamese and Thai prisoners who were also pilots who were captured, and they were basically trustees around the camp who cleaned up, but they also were passing messages for us. And we also communicated through the tap code, which through the wall we could communicate with the different prisoners around us. And then we also had a phonetic alphabet that we used to, when we could get a visual of other POWs and other cells, we could communicate visually with them on a daily basis. And the armistice was signed almost a year later, and the ceasefire and everything. And basically, we had won the war by that time. You couldn't even get a match to light a cigarette in Hanoi because we had blockaded all their ports, and we had destroyed the railroads to China, which they got a lot of supplies from. And basically, they could no longer carry on the war in the South because they couldn't get any supplies down there anymore. And so the interrogators basically told us that they had to get America out of the war because they couldn't continue it. And they had said up front that the ceasefire was just a piece of paper and didn't mean anything to them. And sure enough, within a year after we had withdrawn our troops, they started up the war again, and this time they took over South Vietnam, which was not communist, but it was somewhat of a corrupt society. South Vietnam, it was kind of like I guess, Afghan society, in that it was there was a lot of bribery and money being pilfered and stuff like that to be able to get anything done in the government. And they didn't have a real strong army that had a real sense of republic that they felt in South Vietnam. So with the help of supplies from Russia and China, the North Vietnamese were fairly easily able to take over South Vietnam without our being there to try to help South Vietnam from doing that. So that's basically, my story, and anything you'd like to ask, I guess I'll open it for questions. My three reporters here, basically, I guess, have the first questions.
Going back to your POW situation, what was your inspiration, or what didn't let your spirit break while you were isolated?
I'd say the strongest inspiration was my faith, which became an awful lot stronger during that time, because we didn't know if we were ever going to be released. So we could have been there for the forever, and we didn't know for sure that our names had gotten out, that our families knew that we were a prisoner, or whether they thought we were dead or not. And so that was very tough psychologically to get past, and a lot of prayer and strong faith. We had church services when we were in the larger rooms with more POWs. Once we got to that point, we had church services every morning, basically, and then a larger one on Sunday. And we had other things to try to keep us going, because we didn't get any of the Red Cross packets that were being sent to us with books and food and pictures and stuff like that. All we had was under the Geneva Convention, they would allow some of the POWs, not all of them, to write 7-line letters every so often. It was supposed to be every month under the Geneva Convention rules, but it was just whenever they decided that we could write a letter. And the only letters you received were usually bad news ones, like my grandmother had died, and of course that letter got through, and many of the others did. We kept ourselves occupied. We had an 18-hour bridge game that was going on all the time. We'd stolen the cards from the guard shack initially, and then pretty much after a while we could, after bugging the guards incessantly, finally started to get decks of cards from them. But they were cardboard, so they didn't last too long. The plastic ones that the Red Cross sent, they kept for themselves. And we had a poker game that went 18 hours a day too, and we had made with the bread that they have, which is fairly unleavened, that they gave us. You just pack it into a small coin shape and put it up on top of the barred windows, and what the rats didn't eat within a few days was pretty hard. And then we used a brick to color some of them red from crushed brick, and then we used their betadine that they would give you for cuts and open sores and stuff, which is blue, and we colored the other coins, so we had nickel, dime, quarters with that, and we had a treasurer that kept track of who won what, who lost what each day. And I think the worst off by the time we were released, one of the Navy lieutenant commanders owed about $40,000 he'd lost. But most of us, I pretty much broke even. I think it was plus $400. So we all evened up within about 6 months after we got back and paid off our debt, gambling debts. Go ahead.
Do you consider the Viet Cong or people that captured you savages?
Well, I was not captured by Viet Cong since I was in North Vietnam, so it was North Vietnamese that captured me, and obviously they had a much more rudimentary society than we did. And they had never seen TVs. They didn't have, they had radios, some of them, maybe one radio to a village or something to listen to news and things of that sort. And mainly because of the way that they tortured the prisoners, gave us the impression that they were a lot closer to the monkey than we were. A lot of times they associate pain with sex, and we would see them sometimes outside in the courtyard in a circle with sticks beating a puppy, and they just beat it to death. And now dogs, of course, were on their regular diet in Vietnam. Dogs are kind of dog meat is a delicacy, I guess. So whenever, our mascot dogs that were on the base, we had to protect and make sure that Vietnamese didn't grab them, even the South Vietnamese, for a meal that night, or something. So, but anyway, they also would, in beating prisoners, they would get a definite enjoyment out of it, and it was a sexual enjoyment, and so it was really a strange situation. You know, you hear that in prisons around this country that there's possibly sex going on among prisoners. It's actually the guards in Vietnam. They were very strange and weird in that situation. And the only thing they really understood was force. They didn't understand negotiations at all. Negotiation was only an opportunity to put forward their agenda and propaganda. So I thought they were pretty primitive. They weren't exactly like, say, Aborigines may have been 100 years ago or something, because they didn't have the skills that the American Indians really had. They had a society and a culture, and I really didn't think that these people had much of a society, even though they'd been around for thousands of years, and they'd been fighting the Chinese for over 1,000 years. The Chinese had developed civilization, culture, but for some reason the Vietnamese never got the idea. Just or the second chest. Sorry.
When you'd be out flying a mission and then you'd come back, was there times when you'd remember you'd see someone missing when you came back?
Yeah, especially when the war ramped up in going north, because the situation up north, at that time, the anti-aircraft and surface-to-air missile environment that we faced was the worst in the world, worst it had ever been in the world. I guess now they say that Baghdad really had become the worst in the world for air-to-air flying. But yeah, we lost 55 aircraft in about 3 months, and there were less and less guys to sit down to eat with. We kind of felt like the German Luftwaffe must have felt towards the end of the war, because they had lost a lot of compadres, and I lost a lot of good friends up there that were shot down and you know, or had disappeared, or they had maybe crashed into a mountain, something like that, and we never knew if they got out or if they didn't get out. But a lot of the situations did kind of show that there weren't any chutes that were visible by the other aircraft in the flight, and so we pretty much knew that we had lost that crew. And a lot of them were very close, very good friends, because you became very close in that environment, because you lived and breathed the war. That's basically what you were there to do, and that's what you were doing 24 hours.
Once you were liberated, I mean, there's an obvious feeling of ease, but did it take you some time to get back into the swing of things, or to relate back to the real world and carry on with your duties?
I'll give you 2 examples of how long it took. The first one was some of the POWs had been there as long as 7 years, and So they had arranged when the POWs were about to be released, they started preparing at Clark Air Base in the Philippines for the first people to come in, and we insisted that when they release us, they do us by date of shoot down, or in other words, the earliest go first, and the sick and wounded go first. And we said otherwise we're not going. So the North Vietnamese had to agree to our demands. Anyway, they had set up for feeding the POWs very bland food because we had been on a very restricted, lousy diet while we were incarcerated. And they felt that they needed to have that bland diet to kind of start adjusting to normal food again. And the first POWs that were released, you know, they said, "What's this stuff?" You know, "I'm sorry, but we want steaks, we want lobster, we want you know, all these pies, we want all these things that we've been thinking about, that's been keeping us going and talking, because we talked a lot about food sometimes, you know, our good restaurants around the world, you know, good restaurants in Hong Kong, the best restaurants in Tokyo, things like that, different menus that they serve. You talked about a lot of things when you had all that time on your hands. So anyway, they demanded it, and within, you know, a number of days, they had changed everything. And by the time I got released, I was in the second to the last release, and geez, they had a spread you just wouldn't believe. Just anything and everything you wanted to eat, they had. And the POWs, of course, they adjusted immediately to getting back to, you know, good food, steaks, and also hamburgers and stuff like that, without any trouble. The other adjustment was the Air Force would not reassign us back into the Air Force for a minimum of 6 months before we could go back to, you know, or go on to our next assignment. And that was kind of driving us nuts. It was good to have a good period of readjustment, and I enjoyed the time off. And during that first 3 months, I was very busy. I had to hire a part-time secretary for keeping track of all the different engagements and things that I had on my calendar. I was being interviewed by radio and TV, and I was on various TV programs and things like charity, you know, program. Cystic fibrosis was one big one I remember. It was a 24-hour telethon, and we were going all over. We were invited down to Dallas by Bob Hope. We were invited out to San Francisco for a big shindig, the Western White House, of course, Nixon's place. The actual White House we went to, and we had a, you know, 3 or 4 days with President Nixon and his staff, and a lot of big stars and stuff came to dinner with us, and we went to Indianapolis 500. We got to ride the pace car, you know, and just being a head of a local, the person honored for a local parade or something, 4th of July parade or something like that. it was quite a heavy schedule, really, to keep up with. And 3 months of that was a lot of fun, but after that it started getting a little old, and I wanted to get back to work. And, they pretty much held to that 6 months before anyone really got back to an assignment. So there's a couple of examples as far as adjustment was concerned.
Do you feel that the training at the Air Force Academy or the experience that you had before you captured prepared you in any way? I mean, did you just adapt by natural ability, or how?
Well, definitely there was training that helped a lot. At the academy, we had a survival, escape, and evasion program, which was basically your sophomore summer you have survival in the Rocky Mountains, and then your junior year they were just starting to develop. I was in the 10th graduating class at the academy. They were just starting to develop the escape and evasion program and set up a POW camp, and a lot of this was based on the Korean War experience, because that was the latest experience that we had to use, and we learned a lot from that. But then after I graduated, I was sent through water survival school and another survival school up in the state of Washington, where they had POW experience as well. And then over in Vietnam, we went through jungle survival for a week in the Philippines. So a lot of this really helped, because I learned how, after I parachuted out, how to ditch what I didn't need and take what I did need, and get myself into hiding. And geez, the searchers came within 5 feet of me at least 10 times, and never found me, because of the techniques that we had learned to just blend right into the ground, and bushes and stuff. It wasn't really a thick jungle. I expected it to be, but it was just basically a woods like Ohio. It wasn't much different than that. So you had to really pick your hiding spots and work on it pretty well before dawn, before the sun came up, and pretty much stay in it all day till nighttime. The villagers returned to the village at nighttime. I thought there might be different guards posted at some of the water areas, but I didn't know that for sure. The third night, there was a cat that was tracking me. I kept moving my position. I was supposed to stay in one area because the rescue that had failed the day before was going to come back to that same area and pick me up. And so I was told to stay in that general area. But I had this cat that kept stalking me at night. I don't know if it was a lynx or a mountain lion or what, but it was very curious. I didn't know if it was hungry or if it was just curious, but anyway, I kept my weapon out, just to try not to fall completely asleep, and I had to keep moving because it kept trying to sneak up on me. Stuff. So it was good preparation for it. It's just that the best you can prepare is from the previous war, the previous experience. And a number of the POWs went back and advised the survival and escape invasion and POW schools, so that they changed their procedures and stuff to more line up with the Vietnam experience. In fact, they had the POW schools. The survival school was a former POW for a long time, and then after the next experience, which basically I guess was the Gulf War, then the training changed once again because it was a different environment.
When you were in Vietnam, what type of missions? Just protection or?
The good thing about being in the country meant in South Vietnamese, in South Vietnam, and being in the middle of the war, meant we got to fly every type of mission that fighter bombers flew. Basically, we flew just missions where we carried bombs, and we had a specific mission to bomb a certain truck park, or maybe a supply depot or something like that. And other times we went out and we had napalm on board, and we were working with troops in contact, either South Vietnamese or American troops that were fighting against Viet Cong or North Vietnamese regulars, and we would help support those troops by laying down ordnance on the enemy to suppress them and force them, back or take them out if we could. And then we would fly mining missions where we would lay different kinds of mines in the jungle, and that was high speed, but all these mines had jungle penetrators down to the ground, and then there are different kinds of mines. There are little gravel-like things that it looked like a little pebble that if you stepped on would blow a hole through your boot, or there were mines that would penetrate down, and as soon as it hit the ground, they'd shoot out all of these 20-foot long lines, wires, and if you tripped any of them, it would detonate. And there were bombs that we dropped that were metallically sensitive, so you could walk up to the bomb, but you couldn't walk away. If you started to walk away, it would detonate. And there were a lot of clever stuff. There was a lot of anti-personnel weapons that we would drop, which were like either small softball size weapons. There'd be hundreds of them in a canister, and they would spread in an even kind of spread, and they would explode, and behind them were little ball bearings that would come out of these softballs, and they would have incendiary with them, so if they went through ammunition or any kind of supplies, they would start fires with them. Also, of course, any personnel that were there, unless they had their heads down, would also, and those were used by B-52s in this recent war. We had laser-guided bombs in the last year and a half of the war. We started using laser-guided to take out bridges and specific buildings and things. Obviously the laser-guided bombs have been upgraded quite a bit over the years, but this was the beginnings of them. And we'd have air-to-air missions where we would go out configured with missiles, both heat-seeking and radar air-to-air missiles. And I was fortunate enough to shoot down 2 MiG-19s about a week before I was shot down. So we pretty much did the gamut.
That's one.